Hello family, this is African Esquire TV. I'm your host, Tony Cherie. So I've seen the movie Queen and Slim and I want to talk about it. But before I do want to say that if you have not subscribed already to the We Charge Colonialism channel, please subscribe. We are an organization who is fighting for the right for self-determination of African Americans. You might say, what's the right to self-determination? That's the right to self-govern. We know when Malcolm X said we have to have control over our social institutions, our political institutions, our educational institutions, all these other things. He was saying that we need to have self-determination. And there are legal rights, human rights to self-determination. And so that is what we're fighting for. In particular, this video that I just did for the channel We Charge Colonialism is talking about our new project that is going to be called the Justice Bank. That will be a fund that we're starting to help some of our brothers and sisters get out of jail who are on bail. And I will talk about it more in that video, but just the short of it is, of course, the bail system is an example of colonialism of African Americans because you basically are guilty. You know, you're treated guilty even if you're innocent. You could have not committed any crime, and under the Constitution, you're not supposed to be jailed, right, if you didn't commit a crime. But the fact is, if you can't pay that bail, then you're going to be sitting in jail even if you're innocent. So obviously, this is a system that's going to disproportionately affect Black people who are already targets of the prison industrial complex. But in particular, we don't have the money to pay a bail. We don't have the money that white people have. So we are in droves sitting inside of prisons, some for very small amounts, but they just can't afford it. You know, the article I read in a video is saying that the average income for people who are offered bail is like $16,000, and so $500 bail, that might be a lot to not be a lot to you if you have like a $70,000 income, but if you have a $16,000 income, $500 is a lot. So people who are on bail, we want to start raising money for our brothers and sisters to actually help some of them, and you will find out more about that on the We Charge Colonialism video on the channel. And if you were interested in joining the organization, just email wechargecolonialism@gmail.com. Okay, so I want to talk about the movie Queen and Slim. I have to give a spoiler alert. I actually had to do this video all over because originally I was going to try not to talk about the ending, but I kind of have to. So if you have not watched the movie, and you plan on watching the movie, do not watch this video. Spoiler alert, don't watch. I said it. If you do not listen to me, then I don't know what to say to you. But come back when you do watch the video, or do watch the movie, because, you know, some good stuff I want to talk about. Of course, in the movie, you have a couple, an African-American couple, not really a couple, they're people who just had a first date. And on the first date, the man, who is Slim, he has to kill a cop, basically, because he's pulled over by the police, and the police officer is doing it in a search of him, and in the process, he ends up trying to kill him and kill the woman, and ends up getting killed himself and out of self-defense. So what happens if Queen and Slim, they go on a run, because obviously if you kill a cop, it doesn't matter if it is self-defense, you're probably going to jail for life, and depending on what state you're in, you're going to get executed, or just be on death row for life, because a lot of people don't even get executed on death row depending on the state that you're in. But if you're in Texas, you will be getting executed. So obviously they decide to run away. And in the process, they're garnering support around the Black community, and that's where I want to focus. So they're running away from the police. The Black community is for them. They're happy about the fact that these people, number one, they're innocent. You know, even though the country has labeled them as guilty, they are innocent. They did not act out. They did not go out and try to kill this cop. They're acting out of self-defense, and we do have a right to defend ourselves, right, under the Constitution. Now, of course, that's not true in the gist of it, because we know that African Americans, we're not given that same right. And in particular, you're not given a right to self-defense if you're going to go out and defend yourself against something that is a part of the power structure. In this instance, the police departments are obviously a part of the power structure. They are the agents of the white supremacist capitalist system. That is their commission, basically, to ensure that the capitalist system remains intact. And if you therefore do something of self-defense against them, it's not considered self-defense. It's considered an attack on the system, because you attack the agents of the system. So we know that they were innocent, but of course the country does not label them as innocent. They are pursued like they are fugitives. They are pursued like they are people who did a mass shooting, and they are putting all hands on deck to try to get these people arrested. Now, in the process, they're able to evade the law several times. And of course, this garners support in the Black community because number one, we see that they're innocent. Number two, we don't usually get to evade the law inside of those situations. So it creates this aura around them. A lot of people look at them in a symbolic way, and that's the key word in this video, symbolism. And a lot of people are garnering support for this couple. Unfortunately, well, before I get to the end, at one point, there's a young African-American man, and he's a teenager, I believe, and he's basically a fan of them because, hey, you guys got away with, killing a cop. Even if it was self-defense, you still got away with it. You're still living, to tell the story. And they tell him, well, it's not something that we wanted, blah, blah, blah. But, he's like, y'all are going to be, immortal is the word he used. Y'all are going to be infamous. Like, you're basically a martyr for what happened, even if you die, even if you don't make it. And he wanted to be a martyr. He wanted to be immortal in that way. And that the movie goes on, and they even take a picture. This little boy takes a picture of them, and this picture will be used later on. Now, of course, here's the ending. They get killed, right? They get killed by the government. They didn't make it. They were trying to get to Cuba to get asylum like Assata Shakur. However, they didn't make it. And because of that, we're left in a situation that a lot of us have been left in from the Black Lives Matter movement. And that is where we're stuck. We don't know how to deal with it. We don't know how to address the problem. And all that we can do is revert to symbolism. So in this movie, the symbolism was that picture that the teenage boy took of them is the picture of them. And that was basically painted on a spray building. Now, how reminiscent is that of how we do things? We feel like we can't address the injustice. We protest, we try to fight for them. There was a lot of protests in support of them, right? But ultimately, the system is resistant to change. Because the system is resistant to change, it is patient. The system is very patient. It's willing to wait for us to be done protesting. It's willing to wait for us to get off social media. It's willing to wait it, even if it has to wait a month or so, even if it has to wait longer than that. It's willing to wait. It's very patient. And once our anger is subsided, the system is still intact. So what do? We have no other recourse except for to mourn the person that died, and we make them a martyr. And then every year we talk about this is the anniversary of when this person died. Although we're not doing anything to change the situation that led to their death. We're not doing anything to make sure that the system does not continue to kill people. All that we can do, we feel like we've done nothing. All that we can do is basically keep going. Now, the interesting thing that I think is that we have people, you look at our martyrs throughout history. You got people like Malcolm X, right? He's the big one. We got Fred Hampton. You got Huey P. Newton. We got so many, I can't, obviously the Queen Assata Shakur. People who are martyrs, people who have faced losing their lives or their lives or their livelihood, whatever. They've lost everything for the Black struggle. And we celebrate these people. We paint them on buildings. We paint them on shirts. We have them as our profile. And then again, on the anniversaries of their death or anniversaries of their birth, we'll, have a nice long Twitter post or a nice long Facebook post saying this is the day where Fred Hampton left us. This is the day where Huey Newton left us. This is what we do, right? But what are we doing about the system that killed them? Most of us are doing nothing. Most of us feel, because of the constant deaths, we actually feel discouraged from doing anything. And it's kind of like when you think about what will happen in colonialism, but what happened in slavery, is that, let's say there was a slave that was a runaway slave. Let's say there was someone that pushed back, someone who fought against the system. What did they do? Well, they would castrate him. He would kill him, obviously, and they would hang him on a tree, and they leave him out all day for everyone else to see. They wanted every single Black person to see that person that was killed and done away with. Why? Because obviously the idea was to make sure that no other slaves felt bold enough to actually challenge the system of slavery. That was their aim. They wanted to make sure that, okay, this was your person who was This is your Nat Turner. Nat Turner, he was left out for a long time, right? He was hung and left out because they wanted people to see this is what happens whenever you try to oppose the system. This is what happens when you try to change the system. You ultimately be done away with if you are a threat to the system. Now, this is meant to cripple us. This is meant to encourage us to continue on. We forget about the words of Malcolm. We remember the life of Malcolm, but we forget about what he said. We forgot about the fact that he was saying, we need to be done with this whole system. We have to make sure that we're protecting ourselves and we're having our own systems and having our own control of our own communities. We forget all that because we know that he died for it. We know that Huey died for it. We know. So the interesting thing that I think was very realistic, which I think was good that they showed it this way, is that the fact that the system did not change because of Clean and Slim did not motivate Black people to do anything. It did not motivate Black people to prevent Black deaths. Basically, they mourned them, and what did they do? They put their picture on as a mural, and then everything goes on the way that it was going. This is why we are still in a condition that we're in, because we've been so conditioned and traumatized to believe that we can't change this. We can't do anything. And a lot of it is our own doing. A lot of it is the way that we protest. A lot of it is the way that we try to fight back. It's a way that is going to not last. It's a way that's not sustainable. Because if your way of trying to push back against a system that has killed so many of your people is to just protest until it's no longer cool, and then you stop protesting, protest until you can no longer do it because you have to do other things. And then what do? You start protesting whenever the next person dies again, and then you can do it as long as you can for that one. Then you start protesting when the next person dies again. I've talked about this so many times on this channel. That is just not a sustainable way. That's not revolutionary. That's reactionary. Reactionary is never going to yield actual results. And the other thing about being reactionary is that it's going to traumatize you. You're going to really feel like you can't do anything. I think that, unfortunately, one of the sad things about the movement and social media is that a lot of us feel less powerful. A lot of us feel like we can't do things because a lot of us are becoming convinced that social media is the only way that we can do anything. And of course, social media is a tool, but that should not be the extent of your activism. Tweeting is not going to change the conditions that we're in. Doing things that are militant as far as trying to change the way that things are happening, that's what you're going to do that's actually going to have results. But if we're just trying to protest through tweets, protest through Facebook posts, through sharing videos, that's not sustainable. And again, if we're just reacting to the system and not trying to actually think, how can we change this in our lifetime, then we're just going to be in a situation where we're just continuing to be victimized, continue to be traumatized. And the way that we react is symbolism. Think about how significant symbolism is to our people. Think about how significant it is that we would rather debate about Harriet Tubman being on a $20 bill than debate about the fact that there are political prisoners still in jail from the Black Power movements who did not do anything, who are convicted of crimes that they did not commit. Think about the fact that we'd rather talk about symbols like, whether or not Fred Hampton's movie should be played by African American or an African, like we ain't all African. We're so preoccupied with the symbols, but we're not preoccupied with what Fred Hampton talked about. We're not preoccupied with what Fred Hampton was trying to do. I want to hear more people talk about how are we going to carry out what Fred Hampton was trying to do before he died than people who are talking about who plays him in a movie. That's what I want to hear. But we're put in a situation that we're so about symbols. We're about the Black president. We're about the first Black CEOs. We're about the first Black this, the first Black that. We're about the Black person that did this before white people. And we're less about the Black community being out of the condition that we're in, and the African community globally getting out of the position that we're in inside of a white supremacist world. So I just say that to say it was a good example to me, this movie, of how traumatized we are and of the fact that we haven't figured out how to make that trauma into something that's going to get us out of this condition. So if anything, this should start the conversation on how do we actually do something? What does something look like? Does something look like just protesting and then going home? In the movie, the one kid that took the picture and everything, to him, something was shooting a cop. That was not something that was going to change anything. Obviously, because we've had people who do that. That doesn't change the system of police brutality or racism. It's still reactionary. People might cheer for you more because it's like, oh, he was about that life, but he's still reacting. He's not doing anything, and he killed a black man still, even though it was a cop. These are not things that are going to help our people and help our situation. But we have to be talking about what it looks like to actually help our people out of this system. And I would say that the way that we should be fighting about that is through self-determination. We have to have control over our own police department, if you want to say police departments, or our own departments that are going to monitor our communities. We have to have control over those things, over those departments. Otherwise, we're just going to be inside of someone else's world. We're just going to be inside of someone else's occupied territory, and we're still going to be fair game for anyone who wants to take our lives. That's where the conversation should be. It shouldn't be around, just getting a not guilty, or getting a guilty verdict or a not guilty verdict or whatever. It shouldn't be around who killed the cops. Should you kill cops? Obviously, you shouldn't kill cops. It shouldn't be around that. What it should be around is, how do we get control over our own communities? Period. If you're not talking about that, then you're not talking like a revolutionary. Because revolutionaries, you're not thinking in a reactionary way. You're thinking inside of a preemptive way. You're trying to figure out, how are we going to change this, not just for this one case, but for the cases that follow. And all those examples I just listed, those are not things that are revolutionary, and that they're not going to change the system we live in. They're just going to, some people might feel better for a second, but it's not going to last for very long. That's all I had on this subject, though. I want to hear your thoughts. What do you guys think about the movie? And what do you think about the ending and the symbolism behind it, and the fact that nothing did change after they were killed. They went on this long chase to try to avoid to avoid the police, and ended up in the same situation that they would have been in had they stayed and not ran away. They ended up dead. So I'd love to know your thoughts, and that's all I have. I'll see you guys in the next video.